Okay, so now we're going to create one more, not one more. Yeah, okay, one more for now. O5 user input and take what you ended up with in the 14 more loops. And let's get started. One of the things I did a little time on before I started this one was looking at the JavaScript style guide. There's this one by Google, and probably the other popular one is the Airbnb style guide that I really like as well because it's just so clean, and Airbnb is kind of known for its nice clean style on its site. So it's good. I'll be referring to this at times. Like if we were to just look at arrays, right? So I didn't even talk about how to another way, and because it's the bad way. There's various reasons for creating new arrays. And this is a calling a class, okay, a built-in class called new array. So I don't even use that because it's kind of not recommended. This is the good way, and you've learned it that way. So I like that as well. So I'll be referring to that at different times. As a matter of fact, today we're going to do that. Not necessarily on this one, this style guide, but on the MDN around forms, because we're going to do the first, maybe for you, maybe not, form. So imagine going back over here. Let me make sure I have everything set up. So 15, your main.js. We still have the comments, was fine, and from the looping. Since we have them here, we could just get rid of them here. Okay, I'm going to leave the 4 value in array. I like that one. You can leave whichever one. Actually, no, let's actually have the same one in case something comes up. Have the README. So this is the user input. And on the index file, change the heading 1 because this is probably what we'll be finishing out this week with, although I really want to introduce objects. So getting user input. So imagine that every app you've ever used, nobody writes code. I mean, nobody interacts with the app the way we're interacting with it here, right? Nobody does it this way. We've done it this way because at this point we haven't learned how to get the user input. This is actually simulating the idea of the user input. And it's good because before you know how to do it, you can kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't call this cheat the system, but okay, a little bit. All right, so now on our index page, we're going to create a form, right? So forms, there's different ways to get user input, but forms are by far the most common. So I'm going to create a new line here. I'm going to use something. Have you ever heard of Emmet, the way to quickly write HTML in a very abbreviated way? I'm going to do it for the form, and then when I'm done with the line that will create the output, you can pause, and if you don't get it working, you can write it. So what I'm going to say is I want a form. That's the element tag I want. Inside of that form, I want 3 divs. So I'm going to say give me 3 divs times 3. Inside of each of those divs, give me labels. Okay, and each side, each of those labels give me an input. So when I hit tab there, I love that. It's just so beautiful. Okay, that I don't have to write all that code, and it's fairly well formatted, which is the other nice thing. Okay, so the first one will be miles. Okay, and what you're doing is labels are ways that we label the output for screen readers and for other things. Sorry, this should be gallons. So there's reasons we really like to use labels on form input values. So we have the form tag itself. There's an action here. Now, for our purposes, we're not using the action. We're going to actually what we call default. We're going to prevent default behavior because by default, forms are assuming that you're going to have something out on the server that's going to process that form. For us, we're going to handle the processing of that form. So we'll end up not actually having anything here. Okay. And again, the more you not again as you move more into web development, you'll learn about methods like the get method, the post method, all those things on here. For our purposes, I'm going to leave this fairly simple and straightforward. I am going to give the form an ID equal right? I'm going to call it form dash input. Now, when you're giving IDs are ways that you can target specific elements on the page, right? We already kind of saw this down here when we created the output one. So in general, we want to also do this for each input. By the way, before we go too much further, let's go look at it, right? So just to see what it looks like right here. Okay, so here we go, miles. And I'm gonna do a little cut and paste in a minute from MDN because I think it makes it look oh so much better. Okay. And as part of knowing JavaScript, you need to have HTML and CSS on board, but honestly, just don't have time to cover them. The hope was that you've taken 82 and 85 and have that on board. Okay, so at this point, Miles, these are the three inputs that we're going to need. And the input we're going to call ID equals, right? We're going to say Miles. And this is another one, name equals. And we're also going to call that Miles. Now, name equals Miles is really great because what that allows us to do, and I'll do this as I'm doing the next one, is it allows us to, in JavaScript, reference these particular inputs, right? Inputs are what, I mean, I know you've seen them a ton of times, but you've never probably associated, unless you've had some prior experience, what they're actually called in the HTML itself. Okay, but the IDs we've talked about, name now, and type is text in this case, and we'll talk about what happens when these inputs, which we want as numeric values, comes in as text. We'll have to handle that, which will be relatively easy, right? So I'm going to do ID equals price. Good, and then name equal price. Cool. Okay. So now the other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a new file, and this new file is going to be called style.css. Okay. In the well, before we do that, inside of the head section, we're going to hit link, hit tab. That's another built-in Emmet functionality, which is awesome. And I'm going to call this style. If once I start typing, it's like, yep, style's there. So let's look at it right now. Here's what it looks like. And then I'm going to go over to MDN, and you can search just for forms, right? Forms, JavaScript, and you'll get a reference to your first form. Scroll down here, definitely read through this. There's some really good content about different types of elements in the forms. We'll only look at label and input today, but you'll definitely want to learn about these other ones as well. And then default values and placeholders, I'll probably do that in a minute. We'll need a button for sure. And then here's some basic styling. So if I just select copy on the form itself, let's see what this will do. I'm going to go into style. So what this is going to do, it's going to center it with a width and a padding and a border, and it's going to make it radius. And you'll see what this means, basically rounded corners. So if you have all that in place, when you go and look at your form, let's just drop this a little bit so you can see it, right? It's pretty nice, right? Just, it's at least nicer than it was. And let's go back to the index. Part of what happens here is because I put these in divs. Like if I was to take off the div, right? If I was to say, which I actually might now that I've looked at it, it's like maybe just one line, and this is just part of what, I mean, part of what you create, and then you're like, you know what? It would look better without it. I'm not going to give you points on or off. Play with it. See how you like it. Okay. So now that I see I have no divs, those should be all lined up. And you might wonder, well, why not? Why aren't they just all on the same line? Because the div is what we call a block level element. A block level element would take its own line, which is why they were all on each different lines in the rendered page. Okay. So in this case, right, it's because of this style. So if I said, you know what, give it to me at 600, that's the width I want, even though you're centered. Oh yeah, I like that. I think it looks a little better, right? Okay. So now we have the beginnings. I don't really probably need the style anymore. I've got these, right? So now I can actually start writing JavaScript code to target these elements. Okay, at this point, let me just real quick look at how much time are we in. 10 minutes. I think I'll actually go ahead and just, at this point, go ahead and commit with, right, creating form in HTML and styling with CSS or something like that close, and you'll be good. And then we'll continue on the next.